us as clinicians just think of, again, patients just pick up the phone, decide one day I'm going to get this foot pain fixed, and pick up the phone and ring. That's not normally the process. If you actually bother to listen to your patients who are sitting there with 2-3 years of heel pain and have been to different practitioners and tried different things, their whole journey to get to actually sit in front of you in the clinic has been quite involved over time.
No, for sure.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen.
This is the Justin Blake podcast experience for health professionals that mean business. So wherever you are in the world, listen as we discuss everything you need for you and your health business to survive and thrive. Thanks for listening.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Cold, wet Tuesday here in Ireland, and there we've got my colleague, we've got Jim McDannald, all the way from sunny Montreal. How's things, Jim?
Things are good. Snowy as usual. Got another 6 inches last night, so just another day in the life here in Montreal.
Yes, it's but as you say, nothing ever comes to a halt there. You guys are pretty well. You guys are pretty well set up for bad weather.
Yeah, I think there was a story recently that Montreal is the best snow removal team kind of in the world. So that's one of our big claims to fame.
Airports don't close.
No, exactly.
And how's things? I mean, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Jim. You're originally from the States, Chicago or Illinois area.
Yeah, so I grew up in the States. I was trained as a podiatrist, started my education at Scholl College after my undergraduate degree, and then did 3 years of surgical residency training out in Portland, Oregon, and practiced for 5 years at a big orthopedic surgical clinic in Eugene, Oregon, which is kind of the home of athletics and track and field in the States.
Yeah, I mean, that's where they have the whole Nike experiment.
Well, yeah. So outside Portland and Beaverton is the Nike headquarters. And then about 2 hours south of Beaverton is Eugene, where the University of Oregon is. The 2021 World Championships were supposed to be held there. So it's they also have some elite teams. They have the Oregon Track Club Elite there in Eugene. So definitely a lot of high profile runners came in and out of our town.
Mm-hmm. And you used to see quite a lot of runners then, sort of sports medicine wise side of things?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was one of the junior kind of associates in the practice for a while, so I wasn't seeing the heavy hitters to start off with. But definitely, some of my older colleagues. One of the guys in my group, a guy by the name of Stan James, was actually the orthopedic surgeon who did the arthroscopic knee surgery on Joan Benoit Samuelson, basically like 4 weeks before her marathon trials, and then she went on to be the first marathon Olympic champion ever for women. Was in my practice, and then he also treated Steve Prefontaine, and just, a laundry list of other kind of high profile runners came through. And I was one of the younger guys, but he would sometimes drag me into the room and, get my thoughts on something, or I'd help, construct an orthotic for someone that had a, second metatarsal head was longer, the second metatarsal was longer than the first and needed a little bit of offloading, some different ways as far as biomechanics with some of those athletes.
Uh-huh. And then, of course, you went on then after that. I mean, you were quite involved with the sort of Canadian athletics on the.
Yeah. So in 2008, I met a wonderful woman from the province of Quebec, and I was still in practice at the time. And then basically what happened over the course of those years, I started doing some different technology side projects, making some iPhone apps, developing some websites around the kind of high performance running area. While I liked doing some of the day-to-day clinical practice and treating patients, I found myself drawn more to kind of the performance side of the sport and trying to do some things to help kind of up the sports game from a technology standpoint. So I used some of my doctor money back then to fund some side projects. But along with creating the technology, you have to find some way of getting it in front of people. And that's how I kind of got interested in marketing and kind of basically, my wife was offered a position at a university in her hometown of Montreal. And it seemed like a good way for me to transition gradually from clinical practice into something more along the lines of technology or communications.
But it's just interesting what you said there. I mean, it's you spent some of your money on these things, but then you had to market them to actually get people to find them. And yeah, I mean, I have that conversation regularly, with friends and colleagues. And they think if they're going to have this nice new fancy, say, website with all the bells and whistles, then they've no idea then that they actually, well, how are you going to actually get people to see it and use it?
No, exactly. It's in the States. There's a movie called Field of Dreams, and I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with it, but in Field of Dreams, there's a famous line. It's, if you build it, they will come.
Oh, yeah.
And the sad part about that is that if they don't know you exist, they can't go anywhere. So you do have to have some awareness for whatever your project you're doing.
I mean, one of my first tastes of that was about 10 years or so ago when my brother in Australia decided to head off, and he got it's some web training engineering app or website that he's going to develop. And of course, he flew to Sydney, and the developers brought him out to lunch and blew smoke up his ass and said, yeah, sure. Took about 35,000 to develop the website.
Yeah.
Luckily, before he signed the contract, we had a quick word. It's like, great. But then how are you going to actually drive traffic to that? How are people going to find out about you? We spent all this money on the great, lovely website that does everything for you. Where are you going to get? And people, companies larger than our multi-million-dollar companies burn through huge amounts of venture capital cash trying to get a brand, a product recognition.
No, I totally agree. I agree. And what happens sometimes is that, especially you hire someone to do it for you, there's all these milestones and these things that they'll hit, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee success, right? And whether it's an app or a website, things are always changing. So there's always more development work that needs to be done. So if you don't have a partner, or you partner with someone, you're basically going to be paying through the nose to make a little, if you want it to be on Android and iOS, you want it to be, good on Chrome browser and Safari browser. It's not just, build this one thing and then the revenue comes in, right?
Yeah, it's if only were that easy. And and so, I mean, did you find then at that stage that sort of athletics and the Canadian athletics were sort of quite open to this, or is this you're obviously sort of riding the sort of wave of the technology through with this?
Yeah. So what I found was that, when I'm from the States, I grew up in the States. I was a runner myself. It's a very competitive sport in the U.S., as you might imagine. Sometimes they say that the U.S. Olympic trials is the second most competitive sport or a competition after the Olympics. And what you have, I was a 153, 154 half miler, and I was maybe, number 500 or 600 with never a chance to even think about going there, right? So it's a pretty big sport in the US. The NCAA system is huge. But when I moved to Canada, while we have some very high quality athletes here, and the sport is just kind of a little bit more under the radar. A lot of the athletes go down to the US to compete. Obviously, it's colder up here all year. We don't have California or Florida.
And is there here from Ireland and from the UK? I mean, there's scholarships obviously for Canadian athletes in the state.
Exactly. People will, like one of our stars, Justin Knight, went to Syracuse. Derek Druin, our Olympic champion, high jumped at the University of Indiana. So there are athletes that are a high level that go down to the US. What I found is that the kind of Canadian system, and Athletics Canada is kind of the federation. It's it's a good federation, but obviously the volume isn't there. So what if I was doing media, if I was doing stuff in the US and I wanted to get access, there's all these kind of hurdles you have to jump through. And I was able to, get access. But when you come to Canada, you just say, I went to the Canadian Championships in Moncton, New Brunswick for the first time. And I introduced myself to the COO, the CEO. They knew my name. They knew I was going to go check out the 2013 Moscow World Championships. I was going to pay my way. They knew I was going and I could cover some Canadian athletes. Well, we'll pay half of your flight to Moscow. So it just, you get to know people on a much more basic level because there's less of these things to jump through because it's just a bit of a smaller sport here in Canada.
Yeah. And I mean, you just pitched up. I mean, because that's always the way. I mean, certain with certain people, or we just got in contact over the years. And as you go out, I mean, a lot of practitioners think these sort of things are going to just happen to them.
Yeah.
Unless they make it happen. So unless you turn up with that sort of attitude.
You want to be of value to people, right? I had after living in Oregon and Eugene for a decade, I kind of knew the high level aspects of the sport. I knew the coaches, the athletes, and it just gave me a bit of credibility when I came and asked them.
Yes, you got to be able to talk running specific issues to runners, whether they're doing their sort of fartlek runs or they're doing sort of intervals or doing sort of things. So you need to be on the same page as them. across. So, I mean, yeah, sometimes that can be sort of a little bit difficult to get up to speed. But if you get any advice for sort of people who want to sort of get involved, say, in athletics or any other type of sort of sports specific?
Yeah, so I would say like you talked about, like whether it's a sports niche or any other kind of niche within podiatry, I think that's one of the things that people sometimes, I'm already a foot and ankle specialist, right? So why do I need to go down into a deeper niche? And what I say, it's really about becoming domain expert with the type of patients you want to treat, right? So whether it's basketball players or football players or athletes, with athletics, you really would just want to, kind of become that go-to expert. So, I mean, with the internet, all that information about the coaches, the training, all that stuff is available. It's a matter of you then learning about those things and maybe what specific injuries or need is there, and then positioning yourself as an expert in those different niches.
Yeah. And I mean, again, whether it's sort of, everybody will have their sort of own interests, whether it's athletics or sort of cycling or sort of basketball or rugby or something like that. But again, it's always good to be able to work in something that you sort of have an interest in then as well. And of course, there's quite a crossover between the biomechanics is the same. Just sports specifically, it'll be slightly different. Of course, interesting times this year. I mean, I don't know what the latest was on the Olympics this morning, whether that's going to continue on or not.
Yeah, it's a big question right now, right? Like, what's going to happen with Tokyo 2021? So we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of Irish athletes were, again, last March, April kicked in, and I mean, they were just sort of on their uptrend where they're really sort of kicking into higher sort of gear. So that's all been sort of paused. And as you say, I mean, certainly Ireland and certain sports is at quite a lower level, not a lower level, but as within Canada. So you'll be worried about sort of funding if it's going to be another 4-year cycle and different things. They're not as well resourced as some of the other countries.
No, for sure. I totally get that. I mean, I think it's just it's whether athletes should jump the line. There's all these kind of moral and kind of logistical dimensions. I know that we've had a bit of a slower rollout with the COVID vaccine here in Canada than people really wanted. Obviously the manufacturing, both kind of being in the US and a lot in Europe, is whether we're going to get some doses or not. So there's always that going on there. But I mean, obviously athletes are used to adapting. Obviously they had to push off, a year already, but a lot of them are pretty resilient people. Otherwise they wouldn't be in sport in the first place. I know that when I was younger and I was getting into sport, I was a middle distance runner, right? And some of my favorite middle distance runners are from Ireland, like Marcus O'Sullivan, Eamon Coughlin. Like those were guys that when US running was down a little bit, like I was, tuned into those guys.
Yeah, well, Tom Novella, who we spoke with before, I mean, he worked with just mentioned him for the mile indoor record.
Eamon or Marcus?
Sorry, Eamon Coughlin.
Yeah.
Mile indoor record, and Tom just through I think it was through Adidas got working with him.
Okay,
and it's and yeah, so it can be sort of like quite niche, and of course that's what a lot of product practices or a lot of practices maybe tend to be a little bit sort of too generalized. I'm not talking about in the service that they provide, but especially in the sort of in their marketing and the message that they give across to prospective patients. And everybody's heard that they need to sort of niche. Suppose like specializing in and more sort of sport specific stuff is one way to do that.
Yeah, there's a fear there sometimes, right? They feel if they like niche too much that then the ingrown toenails or the heel pain is going to go to somebody else, but that's generally not the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's but it's a good way of building then that sort of like trust and sort of name recognition and things that we've talked about before. And so with your with the practice sort of mastery company that you have, I mean, you really sort of focus on really into. We'll tell us a little bit later a little bit more about the sort of process that you like to go through with people that you work with.
Yeah, so there's kind of two. So I kind of do two things. One, obviously, you mentioned is the podiatry practice mastery, and that's kind of a mastermind group or a monthly group that I work with a podiatrist named Don Pelto, and we can have this group together. And then there's my personal business, which is podiatry growth. And with podiatry growth, I work with private practice podiatrists to kind of help them develop their online presence through kind of like a framework, or kind of what I call like the 5 elements of a clinical online presence. And the first being kind of an online foundation. The second being kind of discovery. Third being more in the lines of reputation. 4 being communication, and number 5 being kind of promotion.
So we sort of touched on that a little bit, like in terms of the website is the you got to be there. Plus, then you get people to recognize that you're there. And so, what are the sort of typical mistakes that you see people make?
Well, I think number one is like you have to have imagery of you and your staff and of like kind of the ideal patient on the website, especially on the homepage. When people want to see human faces, they don't want to see a footprint in the sands or like just a disembodied foot kind of sitting there. While that's better than nothing, it's not really going to like build trust with that person. If the person looking at your website sees them in the patient chair, that's what you want to have them feel like, is like, I want to be treated by this person because it looks like he's treating someone like me or a problem like I have. So that's the first kind of mistake, is that people just make it very generic, and it's not their fault, right? We didn't go to school for this.
No. Again, if you contact the designers, and I've made this mistake in the past, they just come back with sort of generic, stock photos that are used there. Yeah,
stock images are not really going to build any trust or build a rapport with that patient.
Yeah, and of course, then even if it's just sort of photographs, certainly introductory videos were a huge help in our practices. Yeah. Again, so they get to know, like, and trust you. Because again, I think people, lots of websites, of course, are set up for the buy now, the patient who wants the appointment today type of patient, and which I think there's more patients are looking for more information and a more information experience when they come to your website rather than a book today. So just have the phone number there on your. Of course, a lot of practices have the book online button direct to their diary now. There are those patients, but there are a lot more patients that don't want to book today and want more information. And I think websites will certainly find the last couple of years the websites that we've designed have worked more like that rather than the quick fix. Sure.
I think another mistake people make is they forget that they're a local business. I think obviously if you want to be nationwide or international, I have nothing against that, but you really have to build up a strong local presence, either by having, letting people know where you're located at, because that's where you're going to show up high in Google. And then if you want to build out other kind of areas we serve pages, and then try to send traffic there as well.
Yeah, so Google My Business is really an essential to post on and have to regularly update, and it certainly helps with the Google SEO as well. But it is a very good way. And again, if anybody's Googled anything recently, obviously paid ads come up first, and then local businesses come up in the second or third sort of position, and then the normal websites then will eventually sort of come up.
Exactly.
So if you're in Google My Business listing, and I think both you and I, Jim, have on our sites free information about what you need to do in terms of setting up and why it's pretty essential to do the Google My Business. Because as you say, that's going to be one of the first things that come up when people searching locally. And of course, everybody's on their phone now. I think 60-70% of traffic coming through phones now, is it?
Yeah, a ton of traffic is coming through the phones. Another quick point about Google My Business is that sometimes people don't necessarily know that, let's say you have 2 different clinics and 2 different providers. You don't just have one Google My Business page. There's 4 now associated with your practice, and how you dole out where the reviews go, or, where you kind of send people, tying your website to your Google My Business page is huge these days, because basically, since you have Google Analytics installed on your website and then you're trying to use your Google My Business page, those 2 things are going to talk together based off of like what's installed as far as the code goes. So if you're sending like a directions page or a link page, from your Google My from your homepage, from your website to your Google My Business, and it doesn't line up, let's say, you have 2 location pages on your website. You should send the Google My Business page of that location to that page on your website, and making sure that's tied and will really help you in the rankings.
Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly the same then, of course, then if you have if a page on a blog or a page on the website talks about, say, heel pain or, bunions, and the person clicks a link, it has to go to then that bunion page, or has to go to whatever it's been referenced through. It's got to be cross-linked through. Otherwise, people don't spend the time on your website.
No, they'll just bounce off your website. And like you said, though, like it has to be, you basically have to win the internet for that page, right? Like, so you want to have the best bunion surgery page like in your local area, so that people will stay on there, read it. Because like I said, Google knows how long they're staying on your page. And if they're staying on for 2 seconds and they're staying on your competitor's website for 2 minutes, where do you think they're going to want to send the traffic?
Yeah. I mean, a very simple, easy thing to do is just to have a look at 4 or 5 of your competitors' websites around the same time. And normally they're all exactly the same. Again, we used to train people with that, and we show people we do reviews, and all the websites just make the similar issues. I mean, they're all just quite generic with a phone number, all about the practice and the person, about the practitioners and the services. And again, don't really engage with the person themselves. So people have heard about having an avatar or having the ideal patient, and then building the website around that. And of course, you don't have to be specific with one patient. It does make things easier, but if you are going for more sports niche or surgery niche, you may want to tailor that. And let me see, we've got a question from David. Jim, with GMB, should the providers have a separate GMB page for the practice and function in parallel?
That's a great question. So basically what I would recommend is, if you're a 1-person practice, I would kind of have that be combined. So let's say your Milwaukee foot center and your Dr. David Lorino, that would just be one. But once you get 2 practitioners, what you want to do is, obviously now you have 3. You go from 1 to 3. But what I would say is that if you're driving reviews, or you're trying to kind of build up kind of your main Google My Business profile for your practice, you should really focus on getting the reviews for the practice first. And then once you have maybe over 100 or 150, then it's time to maybe start siphoning some of those down to the individual practitioner level. But that's a good place to start with kind of one main one. And as you get more providers, then you have to kind of build out more, but really focus on the reviews on the practice itself initially.
Yeah. And we always found that one of the easiest way to ask for reviews was just to ask for one at the end of the appointment. Not many people ask. And there are systems you can put in to automatically send, or an email after. We found the open rates for those weren't very good. It's a little bit like having people have their paperwork prepared and bring it with them. It tends to be a bit of a pain for them, so they don't do it. And then you have to do it again anyway. So,
yeah, there can be different ways. What I find is probably the most beneficial is the software I use with clients is called GatherUp. So let's say, they have the doctor has a good encounter with the patient. He thinks it's a good person to maybe provide a review. I don't just say do email blasts and just send them out, because you're right, there'll be a low open rate with that. But if they're kind of warmed up to the idea in the practice about did you have a great experience? We'd love to have you share. Would you mind if I email or text you this? And then, an hour later, they get an email or a text. They're more likely to provide it. But I don't recommend trying to either email blast it out or put pressure on the patient in the practice to say, hey, here's a tablet, especially in the days of COVID-19. They kind of want to get in and get out, right? Especially nowadays. But I see reviews and reputation stuff is kind of a digital form of word of mouth, because if they have an excellent experience, they want to tell their family and their friends about you. You're providing them a platform to do that.
Yeah. And of course, there are other simple in-house ways of even just giving them a card while they're leaving. And, would you mind, if you know somebody who has a similar problem, you might, think about somebody who might have a similar problem and ask. A lot of people just don't want to ask for these sort of things.
Yeah, it definitely takes maybe a little bit of staff training and just to feel comfortable with it. But you are providing a high level of care to people. And if you really want to take great care of as many people as possible, you have to be visible to them, either online or in the real world, to be an option for them to provide those services. So like, while we didn't, I went to a very hospital-based residency program where I didn't kind of learn these things, right? So it can sometimes be a little bit of an adjustment.
Like I presume like the training here in Europe, UK, and Ireland, in the States, as you say, most people would be going into a hospital sort of setup. So there wasn't really any need for any business sort of training.
Yeah, I mean, we had a practice management course in podiatry school at Scholl in Chicago where I went. But besides that, I mean, I spent some time in the clinics of my providers, the people who trained me during residency. But it wasn't like I was necessarily like totally on the front lines to see what that entire patient experience was like, right? Like I didn't get to experience like, how did they find my practice? And then after I provided them care, how did I follow up with them and help educate them and help them? Yeah. Obviously, they would come back into the clinic.
You're a bit in the middle.
Well, that's the most important thing, right? You have to have the quality of care, and the way you treat them in your clinic is hugely important, right? None of this stuff works unless they have a great care experience. But 80% of the touch points or the contact points with the patient either happen usually before or after they're actually in your clinic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We found, especially the way we sort of structured the whole sort of front desk experience before, that made a huge difference that sort of pre-framed the patient about how things were going to sort of work right through on the journey. So you say, so you got to have the presence, then you got to have the trust, which is where the sort of the reviews come in, and then the next part was
So there's the foundation, there's the discovery, so whether we talked a little bit about that as far as being visible in the maps, as far as maps go, you're really going to kind of be best for the actual like zip code or the kind of town you're located in on maps. It's going to be very hard for you to rank high, 2 towns over within the maps itself. But when it comes to the organic search, like I talked about, if you build out these areas we serve pages, let's say like you're a podiatrist serving like Willamette, Oregon, or Salem, Oregon, but you're not located there. If you have the best page about foot and ankle surgery for that town, you could rank number 1 in the organic search, and that's usually an area that people trust the most, is that organic area along with the maps. But really, it's about a discovery strategy should be about that entire first page of Google, of the results page. So while maps and the organic are important, the first thing people are going to see, and you may feel like you're the person that ignores it or you never click on ads, but they do work. Otherwise, Google wouldn't have them there. Is this search, this kind of search, Google search ads? We're not talking about interruption. We're not talking about something you didn't look for. This is matching search intent with someone in your local area, whether it's podiatrist near me or Salem, Oregon podiatrist. They are looking to have that done. So while you want to definitely build a long-term relationship, like you talked about with ways as far as providing information, there is a certain segment, if you're in a big area where you can kind of, SEO and discovery and organic, that takes a long time. But the positive thing about ads is that you can kind of like hit the ground running almost that same day.
Yeah, I mean, ads are very simple. I mean, you can go from. I started off with, and I know other colleagues who we've worked with since have started off. It's very easy to do a very sort of simple Google ad. You could probably do it in about an hour or so yourself. I mean, it's
yeah, but you got to be careful though, right? Like if you're trying to advertise on
your budget, you don't want to burn through your budget in a couple of minutes. And
what Google's going to do everything that they can though to try to make you spend as much money as possible, right? So if you don't know that you can actually make it be a 5-mile diameter, or you realize that when you type in heel pain in your local area, that like Dr. Scholl's and all these multinational companies are advertising on these terms. So while yes, it is easy, it's also super easy to burn through your money if you're not doing it right.
So yeah, but again, there is sort of some simple advice out there, but to get slightly more advanced, but it is a very good way of just turning on and off clients. I mean, it does make the phone ring, and it's Google AdWords. I mean, I built my pretty much 50 or 60% of my practices in Dublin was built off referrals from Google. From Google AdWords, and so we're pretty familiar with it, and it was fantastic. Thinking back, I should have probably used it more. Should have spent more when it was cheaper.
Sure.
Because as you say, certain keywords and things are quite expensive to use, and I think I've talked about this a number of times over the last year or so. I mean, people just think that patients just appear and, especially if you're working for somebody else, you just think that patients appear in the practice in a puff of smoke. You don't see everything that's gone on previously and the cost of actually getting the patient to sit in front of you. So people get scared of stuff like patient acquisition cost. Mm-hmm. How much does it cost for them to sit in front of you? Most people just think it's a phone call and a 30-second conversation to book the appointment. But they could have been looking at your website for a year or two on competitors and, read your blogs and all sorts of things. Again, us as clinicians just think of, patients just pick up a phone, decide one day, I'm going to get this foot pain fixed and pick up the phone and ring. That's not normally the process. If you actually bother to listen to your patients who are sitting there with 2-3 years of heel pain and have been to different practitioners and tried different things, their whole journey to get to actually sit in front of you in the clinic has been quite involved over time.
No, for sure.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen. And then you work quite a lot with sort of then patient sort of retention while they're in the practices then and follow up after, because obviously it's more about the long-term value of the patient is important for the practice.
Well, like I said, there's things that have to be kind of figured out, I think, before you implement an online marketing plan, right? You have to know, number one, like who you are and what kind of patients you want to see, what makes financial sense for your business. What are the financials of your practice, right? Like, does it, what is a general lifetime value of a patient, or what is the first visit usually that, what is that value? So knowing those things beforehand puts you in a better spot to know that, oh yeah, I'd be willing to pay like $50 to acquire a patient, which it doesn't seem like such a big deal after you do those numbers. If you're just saying like, I just want to do online marketing, and then, for someone like me that takes a real hands-on approach, I'm a one-man shop, right? And probably like yourself, I don't know how big of a team you have, but $3,000 a month is not a huge amount of money to spend if you're getting consistent patient flow. Yeah,
I mean, we were spending. But it depended. For every pound we spend, we got about 6 to 10 back, depending on how long the patient stayed and what sort of treatment options they put into. So, I mean, you've got to calculate that out. I mean, is that the sort of return that you're prepared to spend? So if you're going to spend 1,000 and get 10,000 back, I think most people would be doing that every day. Would they not?
No, for sure. But you just have to know those numbers, though, right?
Yeah, you got to know your numbers. Otherwise, and then I mean, some practices, again, it's not new patients that are the thing. It's the retention of the patients that they already have, and that's what we do with practices when we first start. Is a lot of it is to plug the holes in the bucket that's already in the practice. Then before we start, because everybody goes, I want new patients. Well, you want new patients, but what's wrong with the patients that you've got? Because it's far easier to talk to and do more business with the patients that you already have than have to get somebody completely new who doesn't know, like, and trust you and hasn't used your service already.
No, exactly. And that's where the kind of communication, whether it's educating patients through email newsletters or just kind of staying in contact with those people, because those are the people that are going to be your word of mouth people, either through a digital platform or just talking to people in the local network that like you, like you said, know, like, and trust you already. Yeah,
especially now, especially now when, again, there isn't going to be as much, ladies at the bowling club at the weekend, or the guys at the game having a chat about who they've just seen to be for their foot and ankle problem. So there isn't going to be, so you're definitely going to have more of I think, a more of an online presence.
Yeah.
And of course, then again, people think that all you got to do is put up the website and have a Facebook page and post some things on Facebook, and away you go. But
maybe 2% of your Facebook followers are going to see those posts. It used to be that back in the day, you put something on Facebook and everyone that followed you or all your friends saw it. But now, Facebook it's a pay for play platform now, right? Facebook has its place and social media advertising has its place, but we can get into that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, you don't want to talk about Facebook now?
We can if you want to.
Yeah. No, because what was it? Well, you wanted to go through the next stage then
we touched a bit on the communication, the email marketing. I mean, that's like I said, it's not, when you send out emails, it's not all about appointment now. It's like, okay, maybe a quick blurb about one of your procedures or the symptoms you treat, and then a link to a website where they can learn more. Yeah. Obviously during COVID-19 times, you want to talk about you're open, you're taking all precautions necessary, and then maybe a testimonial or social proof somewhere in that email. It doesn't have to be some book where they're in front of the computer for 10 minutes. It should be something that's scannable, that makes you look professional, and then they can interact if they choose to. Yeah,
we changed ours up. We sent an email at least once a week. I mean, and again, a lot of people worry about trying to figure out when we talk about this is what are they going to talk about to patients, or what are they going to post? And
right,
content is obviously important. But again, it was just like, what we're doing today, what we did this week, the walk that we did last Sunday. We went for a walk and saw this lovely waterfall, and the trees were really nice, and we could do this because we didn't have foot pain, and talk to them about such and such happened in the practice this week, and this is a new research paper that we're reading. Some people are really into that.
No, for sure.
Again, talk to them. Again, like your favorite patient or your Auntie Mary, who's your patient avatar. It doesn't have to be all. It isn't all about sort of like sales or keep pushing it all the time. It's just a friendly chat, and then when you do have an offer, or you do have something that you want to promote or a new service in your practice, then it makes it an awful lot easier because you're just not taking all the time.
No, exactly. You want to give, right? So
yeah. So what does Gary Vee talk about? Jab, and then punch. I mean, it's a longer process.
But that's the goal, though, right? Is to develop long-term trust and long-term relationships with patients. It's not just like get in that new patient, charge them up, and then never see them again, right? It's like you want to develop a practice that just kind of snowballs, as it goes on. You have people that know, like, and trust you, and they bring more of those people into the practice, and just kind of gets on a momentum of its own.
Yeah, because a lot of that is, I mean, again, I'm sure we've all worked in practices where we look down the list and it's, oh my goodness, that delightful patients in that I'd never want to see again. I think you go for that 80-20 rule, the 20% of your patients bring you 80% of your business, and 20% of your patients give you 80% of your headaches as well.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, we were in a nice position then when you have that sort of control, or you have that sort of practice, that you can have developed and built the practice the way you want. Then you don't have to deal with these sort of patients, and again, you don't have to do the procedures that you don't particularly like yourself. If you're not single-handed, then of course if you're in a group, somebody else may have that sort of more skill set.
Yeah.
But it's again, it's so much easier now to develop the practice in the direction that you actually want to work in yourself.
For sure.
Other than just be sort of like generalized. And so the next stage is?
Well, we kind of jumped over reputation. We talked about reviews a bit. The most important thing about reviews, I would say, before we jump on to promotion, is that it is a huge ranking factor for Google when you have 100 or 200 reviews, right? If you have beyond 200, I'm not sure that you're going to get much juice from that. Yeah. But it's also kind of what I'd say like a conversion signal for patients. So if they're looking down the list on Maps or someplace, and a competitor practice has 7 reviews and you have 170, like there's a switch that goes off in patients' minds saying that, like, well, even if 7 has a 5.0, I'm going to go with like the 170 and the 4.8 because, like, number one, 4.8 feels more real than 5.0, but also just like it's a numbers game in a way with reviews.
You do that. Again, anybody who sits there and thinks they don't do that when they go to download an app and they automatically look how many downloads there's been and the score on it, or if you go and look at a review of a product that you're going to buy on Amazon or somewhere like that, automatically that just sort of happens in your in your mind, and you're more likely to go to there as well. But again, people will go to 2 or 3 different sites, maybe.
Sure.
Especially in their healthcare, and especially now, because there are really, they're not just going to take the first person that they sort of will tend to sort of come across.
But it puts you in the running though, right? Like it makes you an option as opposed to like that clinic that's 5.0 that has 6 where it's not even an option. So when you kind of facilitate those Google reviews, you give yourself a chance to be up there. And then once maybe you tap out, you're like at 170 or 200, then it's time to consider either if you have multiple providers, feeding off some of those so the individual provider profiles go up higher, or switching over to different platforms that have a little less. They're no less important, but they're not going to send a ranking signal to Google like Health Grades or Vitals or ZocDoc or other places. I mean, if you have a ton of reviews, you can do that. Or let's say you get a 1-star on Health Grades, for a few weeks, you could switch it over where you kind of help reduce the negative impact of that negative result.
I mean, how have you helped, or how have you? What do you think the best way is to deal with the sort of negative sort of feedback or review?
Yeah. So the first thing obviously you have to be is you have to kind of play by the guidelines as far as like HIPAA compliant things, not reveal any health or personal information about the person, right? But they definitely needs to be confronted in a helpful and positive way. I think the first step would be if they put their name down there, right, is like determine whether you can kind of take care of it behind the scenes with that person to really understand what happened and can you resolve it kind of not in a public forum to start off with. It definitely needs to be addressed, but that would be the first step before you respond online is to say, okay, like talk to the staff member or whatever the complaint was and see if there's a way to kind of offline have a conversation with that patient to see if they can rectify it. And then maybe if they're willing to, I wouldn't ask for this right away, but if they're willing to either change or update their review or take it down. If that's not an option, usually it's not an option. Usually when people go on, they're like, their heels are dug in most of the time, right? So
I mean, we had somebody left a negative comment on a Facebook post 18 months after they'd visited the practice. So that's how long it had been niggling away at them for. So I don't know, again, whether it just popped up on their feed.
Yeah.
They were like, and then they commented on it, or whether they'd been sort of like waiting around. But 18 months later after, and how are you supposed to? Well, of course, we phoned and spoke to them. And
well, you do that first. And then if that's not, but that's
the old thing, isn't it? That, one person, somebody with a good experience to tell one person, and somebody with a bad experience will tell 7, is it 9 others?
No, for sure. But like I said, if that's not successful, kind of in the back channels aspect of things, then you have to kind of say, okay, let's say it was a billing issue, right? You just kind of talk about like these are, we care deeply about our patients. These are, this is the way we bill. You don't really confront that person and say like you're bad or you didn't listen to us. Like, we have a disagreement. This is what we do. And then, you just kind of put it out there so other people can see your side of things. You're not trying to make the other person look bad or say that they're necessarily like 100% in the wrong, but you just lay out kind of how you approach treating your patients in a great way. Yeah.
And I've got some friends who have restaurants, and of course, when they were open, they literally would have people, smiling and saying, "Yeah, the food was great," and leaving a review as they're leaving the restaurant under the table.
Yeah.
Connor, my friend, just around the corner, he was like, "Imagine you had everybody come in and left you a review as they were just literally leaving." People will leave reviews for restaurants pretty quickly and for other services, but medical services don't know. Don't seem to be as quick off the mark. That's a good thing.
Well, like we said, right? Like I was trained in a hospital, it's kind of like, it feels not uncomfortable, but it's not something I was trained at as far as how to ask a patient for a review. So something you have to practice, you have to have a system for, because like I said, if you're providing great care, they're going to want to spread it to people that they, in their network and that they care about. So they get the same kind of care. But I'd also say the worst thing that can be done, and you see this a lot online, is that you need to respond to all reviews, both positive and negative. It's not just the negatives that need a response. You need to thank patients for the time they put into it. Because like if there are keywords being left in reviews, let's say someone says like, I had the most amazing surgery with, Dr. Blake, like that surgery and Dr. Blake are now like kind of two keywords there. And that can help you rank for things like surgery and such in the future.
Yeah. And then other ways of improving and building reputation?
Obviously, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to these kind of what I call like satellite websites, right? Whether it be Yelp, Health Grades, you just have to have some general sense of like, what are people saying about you on places that are not Google or your own website? If you're completely oblivious and you have a 0.5 star rating on some website and you're not kind of like taking an active approach to kind of combating that, or to kind of like, obviously you're providing great care, you really need to be aware of what's out there. So at the very least, making sure that all the clinic information you have online, the name, the address, the phone number is kind of, you don't have like, there's different services that'll do it as a one-off, which I recommend, but you don't need to have something that's going to charge you like $200 or $300 every month to do that stuff.
No, it should be just a one-off. Again, there was a few different sites in Ireland. Again, it's amazing how people will link sort of through, or how will they eventually get to find you. But there's a really good one in Ireland, UK called Rate My Area, which goes down through even to you can specify the bus that passes outside the door. And nobody really knows about it, but it used to give sort of like pretty regular referrals. And there are other, I don't know whether it's large enough in Canada. I know one of the offices is based in Dublin, but there's a site called What Clinic, which was quite a good referral.
Okay.
An international sort of referral. I had international patients from that flying into Dublin. And they were about €7, so about $10 a referral was a paid referral. But yeah, sort of things like Yelp, Golden Pages, which is Yellow Pages here. They're still around. They and a couple other referral sites are as you say, just have the information on there, and it just does it gets you around everywhere. And What Clinic was quite a good referral, but we'll get on to paid stuff later. And I suppose then even offline building up, going along to those sports events or any local sort of charity stuff, or talks and evenings. And I know that's difficult now, but again, I've just been approached about, and I've just moved it on to a colleague. One of the local diabetic areas units wanted sort of a little bit of advice, and
Sure.
They're going to do that with Zoom, with patients on a Zoom stuff. Again, any practices now who aren't doing any sort of even sort of simple sort of falls prevention or sort of stretching classes, or strengthening stuff for their patients, or a little short video, or a little bit of advice and sending them out. They're definitely missing a trick at the moment, aren't they?
I think you bring up a good point, is that, when you get, obviously there's certain links that you're never going to get, right? So in the US right now, there's some companies that have websites that kind of for their medical device, right? So unless you have like this ward device, or you have this bunion procedure, you're not going to show up on every single directory, because some of them actually are private directories where there's a company in the US called Trace, and some other ones where you're not going to show up on their directory unless you're doing a procedure with their hardware. But building links, like you mentioned, whether let's say you're the team podiatrist for a university, whether you're like, you gave some money to a specific youth sports league, or you're sponsoring the local chapter of the Diabetes of America or the UK or something. If you get a link from a website that has what they call a high domain authority, that will help bolster your own website to rank even higher. So, getting these genuine links from, from other local businesses is definitely something to aspire to, whether you have time for it in your practice, or that's something that is going to be taken care of by the service provider you work with.
What you're doing now in the evenings, apart from watching Netflix and wasting your life away. I mean, again, simple stuff like that. Or, as you say, just a link, if you get over the local soccer or team website into their Facebook groups, that all helps to build that sort of social sort of capital that you need. And again, there can only be then one sort of practice in your town who's actually helping with the soccer stuff and having that sort of profile. So it does take a little bit of work to try to become sort of present. And again, people say they don't have time for this. I don't know what they've got time for. Got time for another diabetic talk in an evening. May not have time to listen to us two talking about how to get more bums on seats in their practice. It takes work, but I think it's certainly a lot easier now. It should be easier now with everything more online.
Yep.
Yeah, and people spending more time online. And do you do much across all the other platforms in terms of sort of like Twitter or Instagram?
For right now, like I focus more on what I call like the high rate of return of kind of a marketing investment. Like I said, like I kind of stay off of social unless it's something paid, and mostly with kind of display advertising on social, we're talking mostly about Google Display or Facebook. But honestly, like I think those social platforms are, at least when it's an organic standpoint, it's something where maybe there's a younger person on staff that takes pictures of the staff and kind of other things where it shows a little bit of personality.
It's TikTok. Have you not seen?
No, I'm too old for that kind of stuff. I tried to go on there for a little bit, and I'm just like, it made me feel about 75 years old when I was on TikTok.
No, I would check it out again. I mean, there's quite a lot of podiatrists there doing a lot of sort of surgical stuff.
Well, if you want younger patients, it definitely is probably a great way to do that. If you're looking for, your demographics more in the 40 or over category, you're probably not going to get a lot of throughput there on TikTok.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would think it's interesting at the moment in terms of sort of organic reach and stuff. I have a side gig, which isn't going to do with podiatry. I get 65, 70,000 views on some videos.
Okay.
It's wish I got the same on the podiatry side of stuff. 2,000 or 3,000, but nothing like that. But again, that drives, then you can use that to drive traffic to Instagram or drive it into your Linktree or into your YouTube channel or into your sort of practice stuff. And there's some quite innovative practices on there, giving a lot of good advice.
No, I'm not against it. I just think that there's probably higher, I think the biggest scarcity that all of us have, whether you're in practice or you're actually providing services, is time scarcity. And what I find is that, like, at least for me right now, unless someone can show me, like, the kind of 5 things I focus on are probably, I spend a lot of time researching it. It's kind of like the most kind of bang for your buck, at least to begin with. I think there's huge opportunities in YouTube and Facebook and other places, but this is kind of what I found so far.
Yeah, no. Well, that's it. I mean, most people are time scarce, so they do want to see where they're going to get the biggest return for the least expenditure.
Yeah,
you're going to put a bit of work into it. I mean, I'm talking about physical time expenditure, not just money expenditure. But yeah, certainly Google. So people who haven't kept up, Google paid ads, so Google advertising and Facebook paid ads are the way to go. Although we found again. The Facebook was Google was easier because basically just drove them from a heel pain page to the heel pain page on your website to book the appointment today.
Yeah.
The Facebook tended to be, we tended to be a bit more, we ended up a bit more creative.
When it comes to Google and Facebook, though, I would say to me, in my mind, there's a huge difference between search advertising and display, which is both Google Display and Facebook, which is an interruption style of advertising.
Google Ads, people have gone looking for it. I've got a pain in my foot in Dublin, or I've got a pain in my foot in Quebec.
Yeah.
Facebook is just, it comes up in the feed and it's just sort of more interruptions. So the conversion tends to be less.
Yeah.
But certainly when we were targeting, I think my one was that I just pushed. It was we A/B tested it, so it was the exact same sort of to the same group, so it was targeted to women over 30 who had registered for one of those one of those cancer sort of mini marathon 10Ks, and that was the demographic group in Dublin. And one ad was just free foot scan with your first appointment, and then the second ad was, do you want to learn how to run the mini marathon without completely dying? Sign up for this free report. Yeah, one booking for the free foot scan, 132 free reports in the first 2 days. So which one worked?
No, exactly.
The free report. So now again, then not all those patients. I think we had 4 patients converted from that.
Yeah,
that was for 10 or 15 euro spend, so it wasn't a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
But again, that's longer term, and I think that's also the thing about people is that they want to spend something today or put an ad on today, and the phone rings tomorrow, and this is to fill the book for next week.
Right.
When you take it longer term, like again, that person coming back and commenting after 18 months, we've had patients who we can see they've taken an ebook 2 years ago, and they've opened every email that they've had, and we've spoken to them and sent them postcards or different offers along the time. It's maybe taken a year or 2 years or more for them to actually come to the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
So it is building that know, like, and trust over a longer period of time.
No, for sure. I think there's really 2 use cases where I think display and Facebook is definitely can do things that search advertising can't do. Number one is that there's certain terms or certain services you're providing that patients aren't actively looking for. Whether it's like a ward treatment or something. Obviously, there are certain healthcare rules in both Google and in Facebook that you can't violate. You can't like talk directly to someone or ask a question that's going to like make them feel targeted, and you don't want to do that. But that's one way is if you have, maybe you want to up your surgery load. Maybe it's an image of you being the surgeon that's on this, Facebook ad. And then the second thing is basically, like you mentioned too, with your mini marathon, is that if there's a certain demographic of people in your local area that you think would be good patients or the type of patients you want to treat, providing them something of value, whether it's a free report or a download, but you can just target.
This is part of, I think a lot of people, again, don't have a plan.
Right.
The mini marathon was always June bank holiday weekend, first weekend in June. So the mini marathon ad went out 8 weeks before that. Sure. I mean, now at this time of year would have already been through the skiing stuff and out of the back end of sort of skiing and winter sports.
Yeah.
Not that we have any in Ireland. Well, we've got a mountain here at the back. Well, friend Christopher says it's not really a mountain. It's only 480 meters. So it's a hill. We did get some snow last weekend, which made a pretty picture postcard. But, at this stage now, then it's getting ready. This is the promotions now would be coming through. The plan now would be coming through, Valentine's Day. Plus then also what are you going to start doing for sort of spring and those sort of training tips, pre-season training tips. And so there would have been sort of 3 or 4 different, you've got to have your news sort of cycle, your St. Patrick's Day stuff, your Easter stuff. And this is all built in. Sure. And I already knew which ad I was going to be running in June and July, which is going to be the back to school stuff for September time. So it was a whole plan. I don't think people have a plan really. It tends to be a very scattergun, doesn't it?
No, exactly. That's the thing you find out when you take over some of these accounts for clients is they're kind of doing a scattershot of everything. They've been told they need to do certain things, so they kind of hire someone to kind of do it without a plan.
You've seen something like this and decided today's the day they're going to go off and run a Google ad. And it's got to be planned and it's got to be worked out, because again, in most practices, and that's what I wanted to do with my practices, I hated that the really busy weeks followed by then the really quiet weeks. And
sure.
For cash flow in practices and paying wages at the end of the week, it's not a very good way to run a business. So but certainly with the way we developed the practice over time, we were able to level out those peaks and troughs. I mean, one of the guys I used to work for before the practices was always of the opinion, well, of course, it does get a little bit busier in January, but then people don't start coming out till March. And then it was like, well, then it's Easter and okay, well, then we're not going to do anything in the summer because everybody's away on holidays, and then it's back to
there's always an excuse.
What are you going to do anything? What are you going to do anything? It's it's not. It's doing something consistently and is and having just a sort of small plan. I mean, I think people spend more time. Well, they used to spend more time on organizing their sort of family holiday than they would be organizing the back end of their.
Well, now there's no holidays, right? So
it's plenty of time to spend on developing the practices then.
Exactly.
Yes, for a while. We'll need some sun soon.
Tell me about it.
But no, you definitely have to have a plan. So even if it's just a one-off sort of plan and test things and see how it works, up to like a very sort of complicated, make it as complicated or as easy as you like. But you have to have a plan or what you want to get from it.
No, exactly. That's where it should all start with.
Because again, I've done that advertising before. The local newspaper or the local running magazine or the running magazine in Dublin phones up. I remember there was a new rugby magazine. I didn't have a plan. So the guy talked me into spending, 1,000 or 1,500 on advertising over a couple of months. And didn't get any patients out of it. And then you go, it's a waste of time.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't structured, it wasn't planned. And then, had that patient that came in 6 months later rather than the week after the magazine came out. Did you take into account that he was part of your advertising for that? Yeah, again, for the longer burn patients.
No, for sure.
And then obviously that building up that sort of recognition in the local area as well is worthwhile doing. I mean, do you still, because I got away from it, I don't tend to recommend now. We don't really talk to family practitioners. Do you call them in the?
Yeah, that's what they call them in the States. I think it's one of those things where
general practitioners we call here. They tend to be the gatekeeper.
Family doctors, GPs. Yeah. So my thing is that. Yeah,
they had some referred, but they didn't refer the amount of effort that we used to put in.
Sure.
To their referrals, we didn't bother talking to them. I mean,
when people are first starting practice, right, they have more time than money sometimes. Yeah. So that makes sense to, at the very beginning, if you're going to be in a local area for a long time, it's a long-term plan. That's a time to go out and meet people, shake some hands, and provide some value to the other healthcare providers to let them know who you are so you have some awareness. As a practice gets busier, and there's probably a inflection point there where they're better off being in the clinic and seeing the patients, that's when it's time for someone like you or me to come along. I think that digital should always play a role, but to kind of ramp up or scale up things makes sense once they have kind of more money than time at their disposal.
Yeah. Smart people spend money to save time, Jim, apparently.
Yeah, delegation is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, and again, there's not something that, that somebody else in the practice may be better at than you are yourself. I mean, I think, again, practitioners worry that they don't have that expertise. Hence where somebody like you and I come in. Once you've got it as far as you can with advice off, YouTube.
Yeah, you want to kind of like talk to an expert who's in the trenches and doing it on a daily basis, just so they can understand, because it can be a bit of a blind spot for people, right? Like they didn't go to school with this, they don't have daily familiarity with the tools like we do. So if we can, that's my main thing, right? Is like, even if people don't hire me to be a client, to come on with me as a client, I really just want to educate podiatrists to a level where they feel comfortable and know what these things are. So either they do it themselves or they hire someone like you or me, but they at least kind of we're on a level playing ground. Because I think some agencies are still, I'm not saying that all are bad, but some do take advantage of this lack of knowledge of podiatrists, and they're getting charged, $5,000 a month for things like social media management on an organic standpoint. It's really not returning any in any of their investment. So just helping them get to a level playing ground is kind of my whole mission.
I mean, there does seem to be that either sort of difference where people go to sort of one extreme where they want to go off to an agency and spend 15, 20,000 and all singing, all dancing website and package and something out the back end of it. And then, or else then want to build a site on a simple website builder that costs 20 or 30 quid. Right. I don't think they sort of understand what they're getting from what they do, sort of things, and how things sort of function. And again, different people are obviously at different levels. But you would have thought they'd be listening to stuff over time. I mean, I would say like a simple one-page sort of website with your picture and your phone number on it isn't going to do it, compared to something that's slightly more gives patients slightly more information. And I mean, you're all about e-responders and sort of free reports or giveaway
Well, if you take a look at my website, right, I've got an email. Give me your email. I'll give you a case study. I try to help out other podiatrists by providing
53 tips of what you can do to market your practice. You just sign up and you give those away. And again, that's the way the information sort of trade works. And it works like that with sort of patients should work like that with patients as well.
Yeah.
And again, you're not annoying the patients with the follow-up. You're informing them and you're building the trust and you're building that relationship with them.
No, for sure.
So when they do decide, when they do decide that they're going to have their foot problem sorted out, you're as you say, if they've seen 1,000 or a couple of hundred reviews and the videos and everything that about you on the websites and you've been getting regular emails, they're more than likely to come to see you rather than the guy down the street who's got a one page and it's phone today.
Right. I totally agree with you. When I think about the kind of the path though, I mean, I kind of diverged, right? And we kind of both got into marketing, but I think when you get into this academic state of mind, I went to, my university, my podiatry school, my residency. I was in a big kind of practice where I was sheltered for a period of time where I didn't have to touch this stuff. We kind of get used to these kind of very like clear markers, right? Like I graduated college, and then like you kind of have an idea, you want to get board certified. There's external markers you have to kind of hit. But when it comes to practice management or building a practice, there might be some financial things you can kind of aim for and try to hit. But there's not this like, I am the podiatrist now that I'm marketing the right way, right? It feels like it's a bit of a fluid situation for people that are used to a very regimented kind of goal. Whether not all these places teach entrepreneurship or marketing, right? So it can feel a little unsettling if you're very kind of academic focused and you never really wanted to be a business person to begin with in a way. Yeah.
You missed that meeting. You are a business person. As soon as you put your name on the door, that you're running a business. And again, they are. If you've got a receptionist and or some admin team and some other sort of staff, and again, if you've got to make wage at the end of the week, you're running a business.
Yeah. And if you don't want to run a business, there's obviously in the US, there's big multi-specialty clinics, there's big hospitals that sometimes you get a job there and just kind of be an employee and not have to worry about this stuff. But the minute you go into private practice, like you're in this kind of competitive world where it's not only other podiatrists, there's other, product providers, there's other healthcare professionals that are going after the same kind of patients you are.
I mean, I've talked about this before on talks. I mean, it's just that bunion problem, that heel problem. There's the option of the family physician, the orthopedic surgeon, the physical therapist. The lady down the butcher said she got this cream and rubbed it in. It was really good. Amazon said they're going to sell you this brace or insole. There's so many options,
right,
that you want a person again to decide to come to see you because you're going to give them the best, the best treatment and the best option for them. But you've got to help them decide that. And again, I try to talk to people about what's the last $1,000 item you bought, a sort of higher ticket item, whether it was a TV or a laptop or something. I mean, I review them. I know you review them before that patient journey, that flight to the next holiday you do plan. It will be check the hotels and check things and the flights and the trips that you're going to go on, and that will be sort of structured and planned on. People make the same choices when they're using the practitioner. I still don't understand why somebody just thinks to poof, there he is, picked up the phone and phone him.
No, you bring up a good point though there as well that we don't kind of make these one-off decisions, right? You want to build relationships with people. It's just one of those things where it just takes time to sometimes build up that trust.
Yeah, you just got to put a bit more time into it.
Yeah.
It has been time. And again, I've built practices badly and I've built practices slowly. I think somebody will find their niche and thinks, well, I'll spend 10 or 15 years till I get to the stage where we'll be running a good practice. And there is a way to do that, but I didn't have the time.
Yeah.
And if you want to grow and scale, the good thing about it was there wasn't an opportunity before 10, 12, 15 years ago to do this. I mean, if you were stuck in one town and you had the sign on the door and and the listing in the yellow pages, that was it.
No.
Social media and marketing allowed me to build, $1 million business. And you can do that off. You can do that off ads and newspaper and marketing.
I think part of the problem too is a perspective problem. Like it's not everyone does it, right? But we see the world from us as the provider of these services, and we know everything that we do. So you really have to kind of jump into the patient's shoes and kind of walk down the patient journey, and then these things make more sense. If you kind of come it from your own angle, you're going to see it as like, I'm spending $3,000 a month on what? Like, I just want to see patients. This house is helping me, but like I talked about, like 80% of these kind of touch points are outside of your practice that you don't physically see. So you have to sit back and say, how do you go find a specialty provider? What are the steps that you take? And kind of walk down that path as if you were one of your own patients. And then it becomes more clear.
Yeah, it's just, think of something that you need, so just pretend you need to go and see a hip specialist. An orthopedic hip specialist. You need to find a specific type of accountant or a solicitor. You're going to do your research in your local area. You're going to ask friends. You're going to look at reviews. You're going to sort of see. So people make the same choices with you. And again, we found that as well. I mean, that was one of the things that I read before was, especially in the health service where things are free. If somebody is referred by external practitioner, I think they think that's the finish of the journey, where we found that was, those patients weren't as educated as we found with the patients that come through us on a different way.
Sure.
Through our marketing, was these patients just being referred and they didn't know what they were getting. They didn't know what to expect. And we didn't find those as good a quality as patients as ones who had come through our other types of marketing. Because you just hadn't pre-framed them. They didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, exactly. You hadn't kind of educated them along the course of that patient journey. I think that's a good point you bring up, because also, like you don't know, the patients don't know every procedure that you do or everything that you treat. So whether it's through communicating through email or just having conversations and letting them know you do different things, like you'll sometimes hear, I've heard from some of my friends or clients that, I got sent back one of my own patients that didn't know that I did ingrown toenails, like before they were clients of mine, one of their podiatry patients didn't know they did that. So they went to their PCP, but luckily they had that relationship with the primary care doctor that sent them back. But
yeah, that was one of the guys who took over one of my practices a couple of weeks ago, he posted in one of the UK Facebook groups, was I've had a couple of patients in, and they've been off to the local physical therapist to get orthotics for. I've been treating them for this, and they got orthotics from them, and
right,
they didn't seem to know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So haven't you communicated to them where they're, he wanted to know, should he put posters up in his clinic room? If you're watching, Tommy, you should have let me know, how I could have given you some advice. But again, this is it. You just don't stick a poster up. It's it's all part of the marketing and how you talk to them. And, the patient get a welcome email or letter that maybe say, oh, you've come to see us for a heel pain problem, but we provide X, Y, and Z, or
right.
This therapist is in the practice as well who looks after this, and we provide this and that. And again, sometimes it can be a little bit overload. We used to just have one of the letter heads just had along the side the services. And again, nobody knows what a biomechanical assessment is, so it didn't matter. Again,
No, that's good point.
To patients, and that's why websites and emails and NF blogs and things need to speak to patients like they're a 6-year-old.
Yeah, keep it pretty simple for them.
They don't know what a gait analysis is. They do not know what a biomechanical assessment is. Don't know whether you saw one of my videos a couple of weeks ago. Alan from the coffee shop thought a biomechanical assessment is something you do in the car.
Rotate your tires and get a biomechanical assessment.
Yeah, people don't know what a F-scan is, or a C-arm X-ray unit, or they don't care. They just want the outcome. And I think a lot of practices thinking that if they put up where you got this qualification and we do this sterilization and we do everything else. I never asked my dentist that. I didn't even look at his website to go. I would take those sort of things as a given from a medically qualified person that we're going to be providing I presume you've got a degree. I presume you're cleaning and sterilizing. I presume you're doing all these COVID things.
Right.
And I don't care about your qualification. I think I just want what you can do for me.
No, exactly.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference. But we jumped around enough. So there's building the trust.
Well, we've jumped around. We've done all the 5 elements. We've kind of talked to some general topics. I think we've done a lot here.
So, I mean, how do you think that? I mean, so if you could, would you start? Yeah, I just get people to start off with a plan. What do you want? And then it tends to build from there.
Right.
I think what people think they want and what they need is slightly different.
I think people have a general idea of what the tools are out there. They don't necessarily know how to use them in a strategic way that benefits their practice, right? Like everyone's familiar with Google search, everyone's familiar with Facebook, everyone's familiar with websites. So they have a certain level of knowledge, but they don't know how to use those things in a strategic way to benefit practice.
It's just, I want more new patients. It's like, great, we can get you more new patients. So why do you need them? What are you going to do with them when you get them?
Right. And so it's usually a financial thing, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah. They need more. They need more money into their practice because you need to have more turnover. Keep the whole show on the road. No. Certainly challenging times now.
No, for sure. I mean, like whether it be having to wait out in your car, like at some clinics now, not sitting in the waiting room. Obviously, people are putting off care. There's some questions I have from clients. Is there going to be like a pent up demand once we're really open? And we've never been through this before, right? So
practices that we talked to and stuff. Some of the better practices had the busiest July, August, Septembers than they ever had.
Yeah.
And some practices didn't. Some practices closed. And they, well, that's always the thing. Everybody always wants new patients.
Yeah, new patients. But like you talked about previously, we want to make sure that we maintain and kind of build the existing relationships we have with our established patients, because those, like you said, you've already done a lot of the hard work with them to get them into your clinic. And how do you continue to provide value for them and value for their network of friends and family and contacts? Yeah,
that's one colleague that we're working with in the UK. I mean, she had such a good business because she was working in a private hospital and private orthopedic referrals. We didn't need to do any external advertising. We just needed to talk to her referrers, the way she was grouped in, and help her expand on her current base and things like offering, again, patient in affluent areas, second, third pairs of orthotics and rehab plans and add-ons onto what she'd already been providing. We didn't need to do any external advertising, what she had come to me expecting that she had to do. She's doing so well already.
Well, that's why we talk to people, right? That's why we talk to our clients and see what their needs are, and then seeing kind of what are the tools available. That's why I didn't talk about the 5 tools that I use to like build an online presence, right? These are like things that will evolve and change over time. And each practice has their own goals and their own opportunities to explore.
Usually if you get new patients, then you need to fix this other issue and then this and that. I mean, it all adds on. And I think that's why bigger, as you say, bigger agencies or bigger sort of like, pay your 2,000 or 3,000 and they look everything for it after you. That's tend to be very, very cookie cutter, and it's just sort of like plug and play for everybody and for every industry. And they just change the title on the blog in a way they go. It's not sort of it's not practice.
Well, they make their money on volume and not necessarily individual practitioner success, which I think is like a different model that you and I focus more on, is like, how can we help out these individual practitioners grow their business? And I'm not going to work with 50 people at the same time, right? I'm not going to make a copy paste website, put one in this town and one in this town to do a ton of volume.
You see that when you get with certainly, you do sort of see it's just the same website, just different times when you look across, and of course patients aren't usually looking at that. It's just us marketing nerds.
Exactly.
That's fine to say. So Jim, that was fantastic. I'm sure there's a lot of information that people have had today. I mean, I think we'll have a plan. Just
for sure.
Things, pick a patient. and then talk to them. How can people find out a little bit more about you, Jim?
Yeah, so if they want to go to my website, it's podiatrygrowth.com. I've got some different case studies, and then I offer like a 30-minute kind of free consultation to kind of give some people a direction or some opportunities that I see in their online presence that either they can take and kind of incorporate themselves, or talk to me about providing services in the future.
Yeah, because again, as with people that I've spoken to over the last year or so, some people who have taken some information and have used it quite well.
Sure.
We may do something with them in 6 months or a year, but it's not necessary. There's so much information out there. It's just getting on actually doing stuff. It isn't that scary.
No, they shouldn't be intimidated, right? Whether it's your website or my website, I also have, we both have articles about some of these topics where people can get like kind of a nice overview of it so they feel informed. So like I said, if they want to do it themselves or work with a professional like yourself or me, those are different opportunities they have.
That's great. Jim, that was fantastic.
All right.
I'm sure that I will have some of the contact information up on the after. So you hold on, and thanks very much, everybody. And we'll talk to you next week. So you can see Martin McGill, owns one of the large orthotics companies in the UK and Ireland, on next Friday. So we'll speak to you soon.